Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. We are having technical difficulties because one of our production people is out. Jello, we hope you're doing okay. For those of you all that are on the LinkedIn stream, I apologize that this is going to end up being posted later than we had originally planned. Part of what we'll do is there are a couple of different people I know that we're specifically going to watch the LinkedIn stream, and I am going to ask that Melvin, if you can, grab the URL for the Zoom and paste it into the chat, and we'll go ahead and paste that out there onto that one event so that we can actually just have this go over and over and over. But what we'll do is we're today here to talk about the investment environment, droughts or flood, how to prepare. The joke about drought or flood, we're in weather people actually say that we've been in a 22-year drought in Texas, but we just had a flood that had 15 inches of rain in Dallas. And so the uncertainty is like driving people crazy, right? It's a little bit odd, that you like in a few hours you have that much rain. But I want to actually share some of the stuff that we heard from different people this week. Part of what I need to do is I realized that there's one button in my speed that I didn't do. So I'm going to stop share and then share one more time with you again, so that, because today we're going to actually hear from some of the experts, and I actually have prepared some videos specifically that we'll be working from. Okay, so hopping right in, welcome to the Venture Outfitter. Part of what we're here for is in the rough seas that are ahead. The number one thing that we want to be doing is supporting each other through these difficult times. Too many entrepreneurs face the difficult times alone, and part of what we're here to do is both. There's a business as well as a community there to support you. If you're into startups, whether you're at the early stage or later stage or whatever, this is a constant need. That's partially what we're here for. Thank you to Linda Blackman and her team at DualWorks for being one of our long-standing, long-term supporters. The studio that I'm sitting in right now is in Austin, Texas at 183 in Mopac, and Linda and her team are really great about supporting entrepreneurs. Whether you're here in town and you need a co-working place or a closed-door office, or if you need a mailbox because you're out of the country and you need a point of presence, one of the things you can count on is they have all sorts of different offers. You can look at that one URL, but part of what I would actually suggest as well is you can, part of what you can do is come in and interact with them. They're fairly flexible about the type of deals that they'll set up in a way that other companies are not. So part of what we want to do is hop right in. DualWorks is still running this. The month's almost over, but if you're in town and you want to take advantage of co-working here for free, they actually have a lot of special offers to set you up with. So do take advantage of that based on what you'd like to do. Thought for the day. So some of the work that I've been doing over the years as an entrepreneur is looking at different references from different tool sets, whether they're, lean startup to psychology. In this case, there's a psychologist named Carl Rogers, and he has the whole notion of psychology that's called Rogerian psychology. Part of the powerful thing about what I want to make sure we start presencing is, a lot of people will say, follow your passions, do all these things and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we hide things. And it's because we hide things that our businesses end up being limited in what their expression can be. His seminal quotes, if you were to sum up his background and his philosophy, is what I am is good enough if I would just be so openly. For those of you that follow me on social media, earlier this week on Saturday, I actually went with one of my friends to the Pride parade. And people say, Pride? Well, you're not gay. I'm not gay. I'm straight. But one of the things that I actually was reminded about is when we force people into the shadows, it really creates all sorts of crisis. In the case of my friend, who's been a friend of mine for since college, he really struggled because as he was coming out being gay, he thought for sure that no one was going to accept him. Now, in my case, I'm like, hey, James, I don't care. You're gay. I don't know why we do this, but whether it's about entrepreneurship or about lifestyle choice, whatever it is, the main thing I want to say in the presence of this idea of creating an open society, what I am is good enough if I would just be so openly. I hope that our politics and our culture gets fixed. And I am happy to see, at least in Austin, that something that used to be hidden is now out in the open, and was quite happy to post those photos. Like I said, I'm happy to be an ally for that group of people. But more importantly than just talking about that group of people with that background is this notion that we should be who we are openly. And that's the type of society that we should be building. The other thing I wanted to share was about Ukrainian Independence Day. David Nichols from one of our entrepreneurs in the Czech Republic wasn't able to come today. But he actually was telling me about the Ukrainian Independence Day celebrations from yesterday that were celebrated in the Czech Republic. Part of what this is about was celebrating back and forth Ukrainian Independence Day. And this is the Czech Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce. They had a orchestra that was from original Ukrainian instruments played by Ukrainian and played the Ode to Joy. So all I want to do is, to our Ukrainian brethren, I actually want to make sure I reach out and say that may this time next year for Ukrainian Independence Day is much safety and peace that can be brought there as well. For the entrepreneurs that we've heard from in the 3 programs that we did for Ukraine, I definitely want to say, know that we're here. Some of them have actually taken advantage of some of the connections that we've opened up. And for Ukrainian entrepreneurs, I would continue to have that open door policy. If anyone needs access to our programs, our community, whether it's ties to our Central European entrepreneurs or perhaps someplace else, definitely interested in supporting you. The note from David says, this is the amazing Ukrainian musical group playing traditional Ukrainian instruments, playing Beethoven's Ode to Joy as a representation of the national feeling of Ukrainians being admitted as a candidate nation in the EU a couple months ago. This is one of the emotional highlights of the evening, along with them playing Ukrainian national anthem in a tribute to the Ukrainian military. So, Slava Ukraini. So today's talk is going to be about in the market area, but for those of y'all that hadn't seen this short idea about how we're like the different conversations that happen and in this program, part of what we want to do is have conversations across this whole stack. And part of what's happening, we alluded to it last week, is that there are a lot of people who are advising, hey, be ready for downturns. Be ready for a drought about to hit. This is where Y Combinator advises to plan for the worst amidst the market tear down. It's interesting because at the same time, a few days ago, there was one of our angel partners, or one of the companies that TechCrunch, our angel groups that TechCrunch has worked with a lot in the past. We haven't done it a lot in the last year, but we're about to change that again. Bob Bridge, the gentleman on the right, is the executive director of the Swan Impact. We're going to hear a few things from him today, and then we're going to have a discussion on top of that about some of the different things that are happening in the investment world and what's happening, as well as some of the ideas about how to take that on. The interesting thing is Bob was repackaging some work that was done as well by Ron Weissman, who's the chair of the Angel Capital Association. Now, the funny thing about it is when Bob, I watched Bob's presentation, and when Bob referred to Ron, I'm like, it reminded me about the power of the network. What do I say that? The power of the network. One of the things that I kind of was a good kick in the butt. I knew Ron Weisman at the very beginning of my career. He was at Next. He was at that Steve Jobs company. And so part of the thing that I want to say that even for me, that this guy that's got this world-to-world network that can do all these crazy things and all sort of stuff around the world, I realized that I myself didn't have I'm not taking advantage of the full extent of my network, because I knew that Ron had started some things in the angel world because he made a bunch of money in that in the company that I knew him in. But I had forgotten that. So it's been many years, like it's been 2 decades since I've had a drink with Ron. But we'll make sure that we start reaching back out to that. I'm going to reach out to both of them. Today's talk, I wanted to have more of the inner conversation among us about the investors, but we're going to actually have Bob come on. Bob's been one of the instructors as well for a lot of the Tech Ranch Venture Fourth classes, specifically the one on investment. The thing I like about Bob, and as soon as you see him speak, you're going to notice this totally, that Bob is very precise. Bob is an engineer. He's an operations guy, and he's operations guy as in, technical operations of a company. And his approach to angel investment might not be as shoot from the hip as mine is, but I have a great appreciation for his style, and I appreciate as well that he gave us permission to share some of his insight as video clips. I thought it was important to do something very timely. And like I said, in the coming weeks, we're going to actually have him come on the program and share it directly. So with that, what we'll do is we've got a couple different clips that I'll run, and I want us to get a chance to listen to then prime the conversation about what do we do about this. That'll happen right after. So listen to these 2 clips. I will give a little bit of a hands up about them in just a second as we go through. So here's the first one. Talk of a possible recession to start.
So we've had a 14-year bull market, which is pretty sweet. And you can look at what's happened in the last 2 years in this bull market. Look at the number of exits that in 2021, 1,800 exits, as opposed to only 1,100 exits the year before. I mean, these are largely M&A, some IPOs. And the value of these exits last year, $774 billion. That's pretty sweet. That means that everyone should be in this market. Everyone should be investing. It's a no-brainer. Let's all jump in. Let's put all of our money there. That's sort of the mindset. And suddenly they realize, oh, things are not as sweet as we thought they were. But if you look at the early stage investments, which meaning, angel investing at the earlier stages, have not been impacted as much in terms of the kinds of returns, because we're early stage and we expect these companies to take a while to go forward. Late stage companies with all these new IPOs, all these big M&A events, is where that big uptick was. And companies who are preparing for those big exits are suddenly.
I heard you guys about the bar at the bottom. I don't know why there is that bar. Let me see if I can fix it.
And pour more money into this category because the returns are so good. There's new funds, there's new GPs, lots of investment fads, including NFIs. That's a $2.9 million digital picture down there on the right. And because there's so much money that the VCs are trying to put to work, they compete for deals, which means they're giving better valuations to the companies than they would otherwise. And they're making their investments pretty quickly, decisions pretty quickly. But get to step 4, when the exits decline, suddenly the high valuations they give these companies aren't going to be realized by an exit. And the fund returns are really kind of expected returns are broken because they were counting, they gave all these companies really high valuations when they invested. Now they don't think that those companies can get to an exit that supports those valuations. And so there's down rounds. The LPs are starting to feel disappointed. And so LPs are losing interest and new funds are slowing down going into the funds. You know, if you were planning to put 5% of your wealth into this category and the stock market's gone down, 10%, but you think the returns on your venture investments have gone down more than that, you now say, I'm over invested in this category. Questions, comments? I'd love to have some interaction here. I'd love to have some questions. I get tired of hearing myself talk.
Hey, Bob, I mean, I get, sorry, this is Peter from Silence. I guess, like, for those of us who are kind of earlier in the development process and are, so on and support.
We'll go to the next slide. And like I said, we'll have the full video available to you if you'd like. But I went ahead and clipped out another one that kind of goes into more details that I think is interesting to look through.
60 applicants to our network on a funding cycle. This last time we saw 113, which to me indicates that people are scrambling to raise money at the pre-seed level. It's harder also, temporarily at least.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. So, there's sort of this downward pressure when the exits are not very attractive. Oh, there's thunder. That's great. And stock prices fall, enterprise values fall. It kind of trickles all the way down through. IPOs get delayed. M&A transactions are not as large. All through that chain, there's pressure on valuations, and it comes down even to angel investors. So here's some more data saying, comparing the last 3 quarters, number of deals being done, and the top 15 VCs are doing 28% fewer deals, and investing less capital. And it's true across all of these categories of early stage, late stage, all stages. Am I getting you depressed enough? There we go. And Ron Weissman's favorite headline, which I love, is too: venture capitalists say that the era of recklessly burning cash is over. This is the unicorn story I told you before. People like WeWorks raised billions of dollars and never made any money. Uber raised, I don't know how much money, $1 billion, never has been profitable. And they're now being told that, hey, easy money is not going to come to your way, so you better figure out how to make your current cash last a lot longer. And we'll see some data on what the companies are doing in response to that message. Bye-bye, blitzscaling. Questions, comments? Hello, Kevin. It's good to see you on this call.
Yeah, so part of what happened specifically about that is I actually, because my background is in bootstrapping. So I've been in 2 venture-backed, when I was back as an entrepreneur operator, right? I call it an operator when you're actually running your own company and stuff like that. I've been in 2 venture-backed deals and in several bootstrap deals. The truth is that the first one that I bootstrapped was so much more, like I made so much more money out of it. I got salaries on the other two things, but I actually made money in the first one, bootstrapping. And so part of what actually I said in the when Bob called on me was to say, I never really believed in this whole blitzscaling thing. It's just kind of an interesting thing, it's just because of my background and stuff like that. Maybe it's because I grew up a poor kid. Maybe it's because of something else. It's just like is more natural about that. It's like let's spend money really efficiently. You have to make money to all that sort of stuff, all the basics and stuff like that. Some of the different things that I took out of the slides, I'll just share, I guess, this as well. So, Bob was saying, hey, recessions happen. We just had 14 years of a bull market. And the whole talk is a little bit more than an hour. Just to kind of, what I wanted to do was take two clips. The first one, like I think you saw, was about 3 minutes. The second one was about 2 minutes. There's a lot more information there, but he was saying, hey, guess what? One of the things that happens is there's going to be recessions. It's a natural cycle. And so that's the first thing. The second one was a bank of black swans. What are black swans? We have everything from a war going on. We have this issue about COVID. We have, issues about some of the political unrest that's happening. And none of us, at least in my age, have seen all that kind of crap before, right? It's really kind of weird. So that was interesting about all the different black swans. Black swan, what is a black swan? Black swan is something that's not supposed to occur very often. Black swan is something that happens that you just very, very odd. Like 9/11 was a black swan, is an example. Third thing, blitzscaling was over. To my sensibilities, actually, that's a good thing. That's just my style. I've never spent the extra money on the super fancy car. Not sure that I ever wanted to. Not sure that I ever would, even if I had the money. So blitzscaling being over, and the whole thing about WeWork. I mean, I respect the amount of value that was created there, but I kind of find it hollow when that many people actually lose their jobs and stuff like that. So there's a philosophical argument that would be interesting to have at some point in the future, and another VO Weekly, to have like points, counterpoints, and have a couple different people. We should think about who would be the person to do the blitzscaling, to say blitzscaling is great. And I kind of so against that, but then again, that's my Austin sensibility. So we got to get like the Uber Silicon Valley type of person. The next one is focus on profitability. You'll hear me about that. And then the final one is bootstrapping is back, baby. Which this is the market that I know something about. So I actually feel much more comfortable about that sort of stuff. Inez just shared in the chat an article about the black swan, the impact of the highly improbable. We'll share that URL as part of what's out there and all that sort of stuff. It is in the it's a book. I'm being corrected. I've read elements of that book. I haven't finished the full book, but it's an interesting book. It's just talking about how to recognize and how to prepare for black swan events, because something's happening that we live in a time that there's a lot of them going on. So a black slide like this just reminds me that this is where we're going to have a conversation. I've got a couple other slides that we'll come to in a little bit, but part of what I asked here in our studio that we have updated, if you're wondering, is the sign different? Has things moved around a little bit? Yes, the answer to that is yes. We have done a bunch of things that we're changing around about the way we're going to do this. In fact, as well, one of the things that we'll do is by this time next week, the problems that happened without the spooling, for those of you all that missed things, we're going to have that redundant. We had our own little mini black swan about a perfect storm today. But here in the office, I asked Omar, I thought that I kind of like it when he and I chit chat back and forth about these things. Anyway, Omar spends much more time than I do on the investment side of the house. My background is innovation, and so I typically pay more attention about how do we drive innovation and stuff like that. Some of the coming classes or VO programs that we're going to do, we'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about the innovation side of the house, how to use innovation as we step into these next stages. But I thought I'd get Omar to speak as well. One of the things I'd like to do is Melvin or Kim or one of you that I can actually see or that have access, give us a thumbs up to make sure that sound is correct, since we didn't have the time to do our sound check earlier. Omar, say hello.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, can y'all hear me okay? What I'm going to do for those of you all that just so the Zoom actually does the two panes of him and I'm going to turn off a couple of your other videos, and then we'll bring you back in just a second, so that things set up so we can go back and forth a little bit. But first off, let me ask Omar.
Yeah.
What's going on in the market?
Oh,
Drought? Is it a drought? Is it a flood? What is it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, it's a bit of a lot of that. I think it's like Bob said, it's, cycles, and the cycles happened before and we've seen it before. I think, if we all remember the 2008 economic crisis, if you looked at the charts back then of M&A exits that, Bob showed a similar one today in the video, you'd see a similar kind of pattern where all of a sudden
I'm not getting the audio now, Kevin.
Not getting the audio?
Omar's faded out, sorry.
How about now?
Is that better?
Talk, Omar.
Why don't you move over one desk and just to see if we can actually do this? Yeah, thanks again for dealing with the technical difficulties. We didn't get to do our sound check because our production person.
Is that better? Can you hear me better now?
Keep talking.
Yeah. Okay. So as I was saying was that, the cycles that Bob was talking about are true. And back in the 2008 crisis that we all saw, which was fueled by real estate and kind of other, fundamental issues. The same thing had happened where valuations were just skyrocketing right before the crisis and the number of exits and everything. And, the same thing in terms of the root cause, or one of the main root causes is the access to capital and the cheapness of capital. And so when interest rates are really low and it's just, lots of money is available, I think the blitzscaling concept comes from that, right? Where there's two things I think kind of, in my opinion, underlie that. One is just the unfortunate but still never ending concept of greed, right? Which we are capitalistic as a nation, as a world. We become globalized, money becomes cheap. People who are smart with money want to play arbitrage. They want to make money on that cheap money, right? So they basically run the system by putting funds out there in all these different vehicles, whether it's venture or private equity or stock markets or mutual funds and all that stuff. And then the other side of it, from the venture perspective, I think, and from the startup perspective, is our American, kind of insatiable appetite for ambition and competition and pushing boundaries, right? So we come up with these great technologies. We want to see where it goes, right? We want to push them to the limit. And so when money becomes cheap and we realize, well, wait a second, we just figured out this new tactic here with, for example, marketing tactics online, right? And lead conversion. Well, let's really drive that as much as possible since we have cheap money, right? And that's where that blitz scaling really comes from, because then it's all about growth versus profitability. And that's what, he kind of comes back to as well. And I think, bootstrapping puts that in your mindset from the beginning. Whereas if you're not, and you are in the timing of when capital is cheap and you're starting a business model and you've got access to investors, you're not thinking profitability as much. You're thinking growth. I just want to get big. I just want to get more users and stuff. And I think, we'll probably kind of phase out in the next couple of years, just like, each cycle, some things will, change that. I think this thing today with Biden and the college loans, right? There is an effect that's going to probably have that, So one of the issues that, we've been facing and why we're going into a recession is we're trying to curb demand, right? And so when there's more money available to people, demand will come back or will increase again. So that could push again prices. It could push again supply chain issues. So the balancing of those is always kind of just the trickiest thing. And, whether it's the Fed or the government or, major banks and kind of how they make decisions to toggle between these things, we always have to see what's going to happen each time and just be ready, right? Like that's for I guess my message to the entrepreneurs is always just be ready, be wary that anything can potentially happen. So how are you protecting yourself? How are you protecting your business model, your employees, right? What's your milestones? Can they be shifted a bit? Can they be modified a bit, right? So that you're staying safe, you're taking a pause, or you're kind of, coasting until things become a bit more clear.
But it is interesting just because of, for me, the thing that I've always been concerned about with especially some of the blitzscaling stuff has been, some of it has been bullshit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Total
I
bullshit.
think so, yeah.
And where it's truly a true expression of greed. And so I, for one, there's a really weird side of me that came alive back in 2008, 2009. Bootstrap Austin and TechCrunch. TechCrunch got named TechCrunch in 2008, 2009. That's actually when the organization, I started something called the Bootstrap Incubator in 2003. We actually ended up having like a physical space, Austin's first co-working space, 2005. Kind of was like blah, 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 blah. I remember standing in front of a group of engineers who had just freshly been laid off. Engineers never get laid off.
Yeah.
Engineers never, ever, ever, ever get laid off. And here they were freshly laid off. And, standing in front of them, I was asked by a group in the city of Cedar Park to come give them a pep talk. And I was surprised to actually, I've been in front of lots of people who've lost their jobs, but I was surprised by how much desperation there was about that. And because this boom bust cycle of, where, expression of blitz, the blitzkrieg or blitzscaling kind of stuff kind of really sets it up so that it can actually cause problems back and forth. It's interesting to think about. It's like,
part of it is the trends too, or the fads.
Yeah.
Say that notable names in the industry, organizations, people end up starting to follow their lead and their kind of opinions or their perspectives. And, Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn was the one who kind of made famous the masters of scale and like the idea of really blitzscaling from that perspective of what he had gone through in the mid 2000s with LinkedIn, right?
Right.
And some of those other platforms. So I think, again, a lot of people just end up, kind of going with what they hear from these so-called experts or proven kind of, people, and it creates a trend where lots of people just kind of jump on board with that. And then, that momentum all of a sudden becomes that greed and that, crazy kind of situation of froth and fervor that turns into a bubble, right? And, when other factors happen that kind of pull the rug from underneath us, that's what we have.
It's like it's a hype cycle. There's something called the technology hype cycle. That technology gets real exciting, and then people just hype the hell out of it, make a bunch of money, dump their stuff, like all the guys that made a lot of money on Bitcoin as an example, and then quickly got out, and everyone else is standing there, as the expression goes, holding the bag. Right, that happens a bunch, and then it comes down there's like it's called the trough of disillusionment, and then the technology starts being what people think it will be. It never gets up to the crazy thing, right? It's this one technology is our savior. Now that never happens, but it continues to build towards that long-term promise. AI, artificial intelligence, has gotten like that. I guess the thing that I want to signal to the people that are in the studio audience that I know that some of y'all have had experiences with this type of stuff, or you might have an opinion about the environments. The not environment, but the investment environment, the financial environment, and stuff like that. If you do have an opinion that you'd like to express it, we raise your hand, like your digital hand, and then I'll enable you with video to come on and interact with us, because we've got some time that we can actually go back and forth and all that sort of stuff. I think one of the reasons that Omar and we have a values match about this whole idea about that, growth is good, greed is bad, right? And so it's interesting to think about. It looks like, for all intents purposes, we're entering into a time that just turning to an investor and getting the fact check that doesn't really it's just based on the story. That's not going to happen. I mean, there's one guy who did it. What's the guy's name? I always forget his name because he irritates the hell out of me. $350 million from Andreessen, the guy who started WeWork. I'm purposely
Andrew.
Purposely blocking out his name because I'm like, to have that much value destroyed, that much cash destroyed,
and then get it again in something else.
Yeah, and get it again. I was reading an article about that. I was just like, I just don't believe that. But so, I mean, what I will signal is some of the programs that we're going to do in the next few weeks. I'm going to go, unlike the last few weeks, in a couple slides, I'm going to be talking about like some of the things we'll talk through about things, about how to prepare and how to deal with what's happening. This is the environment that, me as an innovator, I feel more comfortable in some weird way. I know that other people, I have friends out there that'll be like, come back and say, Kevin, you got to be crazy, in the investment environment. One of the other graphs that Bob had in that I wanted to have a lot of different clips, but in the speed of since Jello was out, yesterday he didn't get to do all the production stuff, and so most of it I did myself. Sorry for the bad spelling and things like that, and some of the quality on that. But and we'll do more with the videos. We'll get Bob to come back. But one of the things he said was 2021, there was some massive money made. It's really interesting to think. I didn't realize it, right? I didn't realize that there was a lot of money that was made during that time.
Yeah.
And so now, everyone kind of was like licking their lips for the next stage of like 2022. We're coming out of COVID. It's going to be great, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. So down markets don't really scare me. Maybe they should. But I'm just wondering, I'm wondering what do you think is next? What do you think that we should be telling our entrepreneurs to do and stuff like that?
I think, again, it's interesting that you say that. From an innovator's perspective, I feel like down markets allow us to reflect and actually look at what's around and figure out how to optimize it and have the time, not the pressure. Whereas in these growth kind of blitz scaling type, environments, we're not able to really innovate. We just have to keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing, right? And so, it's also kind of a testament to some of the best companies and startups do survive this down market are some of the biggest examples of, startups out there, right? So it's, again, one of these things where I think those companies that are, built in a way that they can weather the storm of a down market, and they refocus their priorities around profitability and redriving the business model and unit economics towards that, they have time to revisit their product, their user experience, their use of capital, and kind of re-engineer it again so that it continues to be stronger and stronger, so that when the market turns around and starts to go up again, they're in the best stage, right? And the timing happens where inflection points or catalysts can happen, and they become that biggest kind of example in that space or that industry. And so I think that's a great way to think about it. Like, this is the time to be innovative, right? It's the time to really reflect on what you're doing. Is this the best use of that, resource and time and money to build that service model or that product? And am I giving the customer the right experience? And, it's a little slower right now, so you're not under pressure to have to necessarily meet certain kind of, milestones of comparison, right? Mm-hmm. Versus your own milestones.
It is interesting. It's like, it reminds me of a story. There's an analyst that I worked with years ago, Persian guy. So he was like, he had all sorts of interesting metaphors and stuff like that. He talked about the camel versus the rocket, right? Mm-hmm. The rocket is the blitz scaling thing. Mm-hmm. You just light the rocket, we're going to the moon, and maybe it blows up, maybe it gets to the moon, who knows? It's like in a lot of times they blow up, right? They don't make it. Whereas he says the camel is like, if your startup is going across Desert Valley, if it makes it, it's iron tough. He had a certain way of expressing that I don't think I could do justice to, but it's really interesting. It's like what Omar's mentioning, this whole idea that going across the desert, the drought, the down market, you can innovate. You're not going to have as much competition because you've got so many other people they're scared. They're not as committed to the space that you're in because you're in it for perhaps some kind of passion reason, and they're in it because of, hey, I can make some money here. If you can stay that, then when it's appropriate to scale again, it makes sense, and you can just scale the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I think that, in my world, I think that that's actually a really positive thing. So I'm hopeful for what might come out of that. Kim Johnson says, no comment, just a question. Does anyone have information on the role of foundations or other non-VC sources for social impact companies? What about, do you have other insight about that? I know that we have a little bit of an initiative around TechRanch, although the person who is doing the research on the grants we have a grant pipeline, and part of there are three different classes of people, three different classes of grants for the pipeline. One of them is for stuff that's true to the TechRanch mission, that is helping entrepreneurs as a group. The second one is around helping specific target entrepreneurs. That is like, say, Kim, your company around a specific area where TechRanch plus one of the startups goes after a certain problem set. Like we had some stuff in the medical field, infectious disease field. We've had things like in heart attacks, Carlos and Nancy's company around taking on heart attacks. That was like one individual company. And then there are, every once in a while, we're going after, very small or smaller grants for enablement of specific parts of TechRanch. Part of what I'd like to do is we're looking for volunteers to be a part of that front end. And we're talking about for 1 to 2 hours a month of just looking for the right kind of grants and things like that to put into this hopper. The other parts of the process are right in line. The thing that we're having some difficulty with, the person who actually do the search on the front ends, which we can actually have a bunch of different people. That person right now is no longer available to us. Went back to school and stuff like that. So that's one thing. What are the other foundations in non-VC type of things for companies that have social impact businesses? What would you throw out?
Well, I think what I've noticed is that previously foundations and kind of non-traditional investment-oriented organizations that could be nonprofit, right? Because of the way they were set up, their charters, the kind of like bureaucracies, it wasn't easy for them to get involved in funding early stage innovation and kind of things. But then I think with the growth of the idea of social impact and ESG, and also just kind of technology and infrastructure advancements, I've been noticing now a lot more of these kind of non-typical groups that are developing sometimes even their own in-house innovation group, right? Or their own in-house, almost like corporate venture or corporate dev kind of, team. And they're out there. I mean, one that I know specifically that I think is really interesting is an organization called Upbring. I think it's called Upbring, which is previously the, Methodist something. It's one of the oldest child adoption organizations, right, in the country. And they've built a team in-house of innovation people, and they're like investing in blockchain, and they're investing in like really interesting stuff to improve the process of child fostering, right, or fostering children, and streamline it, because that, again, I didn't realize how complex that world is and how unfortunate of an impact it is to the kids, right, and to the parents that are trying to get the kids. I mean, there's so much in there in the middle that like needs to be cleaned up, basically, and this technology is available to do that, right? So I think it really kind of just depends on the type of social impact. Kind of there are, I think now more so than ever, those types of non-typical venture and investor groups and organizations that are becoming active.
How do we find a list? Like in Kim's case, Kim's company, one of the technologies he has is he has the technology for helping nurses that are working with mothers that have gone through, that have some kind of opioid addiction.
Yeah.
And they had the addiction while the baby was inside, then the baby's born. And, sometimes the baby has been shielded from the mother's issue. Sometimes the babies actually have had, they actually have an addiction as well. And so helping the nurse recognize the following things so there can be some interaction. That's a beautiful thing on multiple things, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how would an entrepreneur like him, do you have any ideas about where we go get that? I'd love to hear from the other people in the studio audience as well as anyone that sees this later in the recording. Post it on to the area that you see this in. It'd be great. But any ideas about like that? I think that's a thing. That's a list that we should be building together.
I think one interesting maybe area to explore there are the sources of the problem.
Yep.
Today, like the drug companies, basically, a lot of them are having to, combat the problem, right? And so there may be sources now of like investment around solutions that can help curb the issue to some degree. I think, again, it's who is the most concerned about that issue and kind of what start there. Where are those organizations? Kind of where do they sit between the public-private, spectrum and sources of funding, basically, and ways to work with them to combat the issue. But I'm sure that there's organizations that are looking for those kinds of solutions, or at least to try to pilot them.
Yeah. Well, so what we'll do? There's another thing that Kim that I'll mention that as we're talking, I realized that happened that both of us should kick ourselves just a little bit in that we had Federico put together that list of 285 investment sources, but we hadn't gotten to publish it yet. Part of the reason we hadn't published it yet, Kim and everyone else, is that we're in the process of you guys' feedback is like, hey, no one likes Mighty Networks, and also there's a problem with Slack and a problem with Mighty Networks, and no one wants to go back to Facebook. And so part of what we're actually looking at is how to work through all the different issues around those platforms and things like that. So we've almost launched the new platform based on a tool called Circle. We haven't done it yet. We're going to publish it on there. But I think if one of the things I'll say to Kim and anyone else that reaches out to me about this, like we probably could have 2 or 3 people who look through that list and rake it a little bit, kind of gardened it and just a little bit of TLC. Then I think that would be great, because we need to go ahead and start building it up. And now the list mainly has traditional investors and traditional angels, VCs. There are some foundations in there. I have another list as well that the whole idea is to have one big database, one big Airtable database of these things so that we can actually work through that. We'll definitely do that. The other thing that Kim just said in the chat, and I think this will be especially for people who are listening later, since we didn't get to push this out onto LinkedIn, is if anyone is monitoring opioid settlements, he would like to collaborate. And the business earlier that I mentioned earlier is right in line with that. So that's perfect. Well, I tell you what, so we're coming to the end of the time. I think this is an exploration. There's a lot more information that Ron Weissman and Bob Bridge and a few of the other investors that I'm paying attention to are saying. We're going to have some more information come back about that. One of the things that we'll do in the next few weeks, though, just to get back to the schedule. So we haven't been publishing a schedule, and I promised you guys by September 1st that we'd actually start publishing ahead of time what we're up to in the coming weeks. So next one, in preparing for the drought environment that we're in, everything we know about bootstrapping, September 1st. So like I mentioned earlier, in my experiences in ventures, I made significantly more money in bootstrapping something than I did in investor back. And I think we're in that innovation style environment that actually really leads towards that. So we'll talk about everything we know about bootstrapping. Now, when I say we, I'd love to actually get other people from the community that says, hey, I know a little bit about that. I'd like to actually be a part of it. So if you have part of that conversation you'd like to share, please let us know. And or let me know personally, because I'd like to actually make space in the presentation about this, because I think there are a lot of different ways of bootstrapping. What is bootstrapping? There was a question a while ago in the chat session. Bootstrapping is raising yourself up by your own bootstraps. And the definition that was pasted in, it said, using your garage and stuff like that. For me, I think about it more from the standpoint of finding customers versus finding investors as your primary activity, and focusing maniacally on customers versus investors. Second one that's coming up, what ecosystem leaders never talk about with entrepreneurs, the inner game. One of the things that we'd started doing is talking more about the inner game of entrepreneurship and reflecting with 3 of the cohorts that we're working with. One that's like in this former Soviet Union area, one that's in Latin America, and the group in Japan. I realized that one of the things that's not found at all in those environments is conversations about the inner game of entrepreneurship. And if we even look in Austin, there's not a lot of talk about that as well. It's like, you just got to man up and toughen up and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that actually really works, except for, the people who really hide what they're doing. That's why the Carl Rogers quote was appropriate today. So the inner game, what ecosystem leaders never talk about with entrepreneurs, the inner game of entrepreneurship. We'll talk more about that on the 8th. Again, if you'd like to play a part, if you have someone particularly that you'd like to see speak, or a clip or something like that, let me know. And then the next one out after that, innovation, skunkworks, and getting cozy with corporates. This is one of the things that in my career, again, I can definitely talk about. It's like the whole way that I was able to do all this radical new emerging technologies, radical new technologies is, how do you do that? Well, you go find the corporation that has the pain that you can plug into. And so getting cozy with corporates will be September 15th. Then we've got a few breaks for the rest of September. I'm always looking for more ideas about what you guys would like to see. But then October 6th, I will be in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. And so I'll give you a update about what's happening there. And I think it'll be 11 o'clock at night or something like that when it'll be 9 o'clock at night when I'm in Tashkent. But I'll have a couple of the leaders of that community, of that entrepreneur ecosystem with us. And I'll be able to give you I already have some high level understandings about what's happening there, but we'll hear a little bit more about that. Okay, well, so with that, just coming to a close, if you're not on our email list, if you're not on our newsletter list, or if you'd like to sign up as a country manager because you'd like to see this work extended out to those other locations, let us know. There's going to be a lot of other URLs that we're going to start launching at this site, the new community site. When we launch, there will be a path for those of you all to onboard so that you're on the right places. We're going to standardize that versus doing it by hand, but we'll announce that, and I'll send out an email. If you're in the inner circle, especially for the people that are like in the studio audience right now, one of the things that you can definitely do, you should also be on our the super secret WhatsApp group, the Venture Outfitter WhatsApp group. Please take advantage of that too. And if I have failed to add you, or if Jello has failed to add you on that, we really want to keep our hand on the pulse of the inner circle. And I think there's like 48 people on there. So there's a bunch of old timer tech ranchers that are on there, as well as some of the new people that are in. Take advantage of that as well. If you're not on it, just text me real quick and let me know, and I'll put you on it really quick. Okay, so here's the slide that reminds me to always reflect on the honor that it is to work with entrepreneurs driven by vision and values. let's go change the world for the better together. With that, we'll see you next week, and we'll post out that publication about what's coming soon. And by this time next week, we'll solve all the streaming issues. So you all take care. Thank you very much. See you later.
Bye.